So yeah, speaking of interesting, we're really excited to have you to talk about your disease.
Yeah, me and my failed organs are. I would say they're pumped to be here, but they feel nothing. They're ghosts.
So what's the actual formal diagnosis for what you have?
So I have premature ovarian failure, which is also called primary ovarian insufficiency, which is also called premature menopause, which is also just called expensive and annoying. So it depends on who you ask what it is. Like some people in Facebook groups are very touchy about it. Like, don't call it premature failure. Like, I don't want to hear I'm a failure. And insufficiency, other people get annoyed about because it's like, it's not insufficient.
Right.
They're dead. So it's essentially like if your gonads just latered you, like just up and we're like, you know what? I know it's 15 years too early, but let's get the check.
We got to go now.
They ghosted you.
They ghosted me. And I had no idea. I thought everything was cool. I was like, but anyway, so I got diagnosed at, I think it was like 37, but it had been going on for a long time, and I just was too busy to pay attention necessarily.
So what's the story?
So what happens is like, okay, you've got a couple of ovaries. Some people do.
How many?
Typically between 1 and 3, we'll say.
Strictly between
Yeah.
1 and 3.
I had a pair, just a bookended pair, and they should be like alive and kicking typically until like your 40s or 50s if you are a lady, or if you were a person, if you were a man with ovaries. Some men do, yeah. And so, and usually they kind of peter out and they say, we're not having any babies, right? Like around 45, they're like, you're good, we're good. But it can happen in people from like the age of like 16 to, any time before 40 is considered premature. So I had kind of a weird symptoms where my periods were irregular and I would note them on my calendar, and I was constantly traveling and constantly stressed out. So I would be like, I'll figure it out, and or sometimes I wouldn't get them and I'd be like, lucky me. I went to Walmart once to get a pregnancy test, terrified because I had hooked up with my ex and then I didn't get my period and I was like, oh great, I'm gonna have this guy's baby. And I go into Walmart to go like, sneak a pregnancy test. And I remember the cashier was like, I knew I crossed an age line because the cashier was like, good luck. And I was like, in my 20s, they would have been like, good luck. It was like very different. And I wasn't. So I was like, okay. So I went to a doctor and he did some tests, but didn't do them on the right day. You're supposed to get hormonal evaluations on like the 3rd day of your period. If you get them in the middle, then they don't have really a baseline. And so.
And you knew this going in?
No.
Oh.
He just took it on any old day, and he came back, and he's like, hey, you're fine. I was like, okay.
Oh.
Doctors.
Yeah. This guy sucked, too.
So shall we? Should we just go into it?
Yeah.
Every episode, Priyanka. Most episodes.
Yeah.
So I'm on behalf of the medical community. I apologize that you had to go through that.
It's okay. This guy then he tried to get me so he kind of misdiagnosed me, and then they tried to get me for a copay for like a year. And I was
How dare.
It's like, do I really have to pay you $40? Like,
That's
for
terrible.
a year, I thought I was okay. They ended up just shrugging it off, but it's okay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Every episode, I apologize to our participant on behalf of the medical community.
Oh, good. I guess I won't sue you then. No, I didn't sue anyone. I didn't sue. Who has the time?
So this was how many years ago?
This was about 3.5 years ago I found out, but I had been going through it for a couple of years. I'd been going through it probably since I was like 33. They started probably failing. And I just had no idea. You hear what happens is, especially as a lady, you go in, you're like, I think things are irregular. And every single doctor, I had like 5 doctors tell me, you're just stressed out, dude. Like I had 2 doctors tell me to quit my job. One of them told me, you're a nice looking girl. Can you just get married and quit your job? And I was like, are you proposing? Because if not.
Oh my
Just
God.
medical
Try to have a baby. Try to have a baby before you can't. You can probably find someone.
You can make it.
Yeah. And
What?
I was like, meanwhile, this guy was like drinking a diet Snapple and was overweight. And I was like, I have some advice for you, sir.
Was this Hollywood or was this?
This was in Beverly Hills. Yeah, he was just
the
like,
best doctors in town.
They literally told you to go get married
Yeah.
and have a baby.
quit my job specifically and try for a baby because I was still good looking enough where I could probably find
He
someone.
was actually a plastic surgeon.
I know. I just remember being like, this is not the advice I need.
Were all of these physicians men?
Yes, they were. Yeah,
So you got mansplained about your own ovaries.
very much so.
Wow.
And it was the thing about going through ovarian failure is it's so emotional, and that was really the most annoying thing. I mean, I didn't realize what was going on, but you have these day 3 tests, and they test your follicle stimulating hormone. On day 3, it should be at its lowest. So your follicle stimulating hormone is essentially your body's gas pedal. It's saying, if your ovaries are lazy, then you're going to need a lot of it to be like, come on, come on, come on. So if it's low, it means your ovaries are doing their job. If it's high, it means it's really it's like really whipping a donkey there. And so they didn't test mine at the right time, so they didn't really have a baseline for it. But it should be, if you want to have a baby, it should be between like, I think 2 and 8 or something. At 10, IVF clinics won't even treat you. They're like, you're toast. Mine was 135.
Whoa.
Even your sound engineer's like, Jesus Christ. But yeah, like,
I thought it just goes to 10.
I know, no.
So you were off the charts.
Literally, like, it goes to 116, and I had this one guy come in, and he just came in, and he was like, "What's wrong with your ovaries?" And I was like, I'm paying you to tell me. But so I got a lot of people just telling me quit my job, like try to relax, and
Make a baby.
try to just make a baby while I can. I was like, I'm like, trying
That
to
would
pay
be
a
the
mortgage.
one thing that you literally cannot do.
Cannot
Yeah, that's not going to add any
Yeah.
stress.
So at that point, people were asking me, well, can you freeze your eggs? And an IVF clinic will be like, we don't want to take your money past 10. Like, you can't roll in there with numbers like a 70-year-old woman and be like, let's pump out, let's freeze some of these guys.
Even
'cause
if
there's
you're
no
paying?
guys. I mean, they're just like, this will be exhausting for
Futile.
you.
It would
Yeah.
also be futile, right?
Yeah. Because what they do is they have this fun, like, robo dildo called a transvaginal ultrasound.
Oh.
Just pop it right up there. It's invasive, but not so much where it's uncomfortable. So they pop it in, they look at your ovaries, and then they give a sigh, and they're like, they're very tiny and inactive. And I'm like, I know. So they just get kind of like little plums in there, little prunes.
So your ovaries are small?
Yeah, they're small and inactive, and they'll be like, you should have like 30 follicles, and they're like, we found a shadow of one, and I'm
Yeah.
like, okay.
What number doctor was this by the time you got the proper diagnosis?
Probably like 7, maybe.
Jeez.
Yeah, probably like 7. But it was confusing because I was like, I'm having these fevers. I didn't realize they were hot flashes because it was like, I'm 34. Like, I don't know. You shouldn't be going through the throes of menopause at 34 typically, and there was no family history of it. So, yeah, and so, but what's weird about it is there's all of the medical things. There's hot flashes, there's fatigue, there's brain fog. So you're like, why can't I remember things? You think you're going a little crazy. But the emotional stuff was really difficult because you really come to terms with, oh, this isn't just like I have to think about whether I'm going to have a baby. It's like, at this point, it would be a donor embryo or it would be adoption or, so there was a lot of that of like, I would go on like first, second dates, and literally on the second date, guys ask like, so do you think you're going to have any kids? Do you think you can have kids? And it's weird. You have to be like, well.
So you would share about your ovarian failure on those early dates, or
Well,
they would just ask you if you
ask.
want to have kids?
Yeah,
Oh,
and they ask.
interesting.
When you're in like your 30s and you're dating, like
Yeah.
they get that shit over with on like the second date. They'll be like, so kids, yes, no. Should I move on and find a 28-year-old fertile Instagram model? And you're like, this is Los Angeles, so yes, you should do that.
You could just say I have a
Yeah.
career. A career is the biggest ovarian failure.
At this point, it made things in hindsight a little bit easier because then it was just one less thing to decide on,
Wow.
The planet's burning, we got a lot of people on it, so I'm like, well, okay. But you have
Very logical personality.
that decision was made for me. It's like if you go to rent a car and they give you a bunch of models to choose from, it's like, they're like, we've got a dented Kia Sorento. You want it or not? You're like, I'll take it.
But were you the type of person as a young person where you like, I want to have kids, I want this, I want that?
Yeah, I always
family.
thought I would. I always figured, but it's kind of like you think, well, I gotta pay for the kids, so first I gotta have a career,
Right.
because kids they want to eat all the time.
They're
like,
really hungry.
every day. it seems like, and they need shoes usually, and college degrees. So I always was trying to get enough money squirreled away where I'm like, okay, if I get enough money, then I can buy a house. Then they can live in that, and then I'll start saving for their college, and so then time just kind of gets away from you. But so yeah, it was weirdly emotional, and you join a forum, for people to swap information on like how much progesterone are you taking, how much you have to put an estrogen patch on your body, like an old lady, and then
So this is in attempts to possibly
no, just to live.
Just to live.
Yeah, I have to be on hormone replacement therapy with a patch, for constantly, just because it'd be like if someone just up and while you were sleeping removed your testicles. Like there'd be a lot of shit that would start to go a little bonkers.
Yeah.
You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah.
Like you'd be like, I was using those.
Yeah.
What? So there's a lot of stuff you have to replace, and with women you have to do it cyclically. So you've got to, if you do unopposed estrogen, then your endometrial lining builds up, and then they're like, surprise, you could get cancer. So we have to induce these awful periods in you, and progesterone pills you have to take, and the progesterone makes you like PMS times a million. It's gutting. Like, have you ever had talked to patients who've been on progesterone or?
Yeah, but usually they're kind of menopause, older population, and it's super low dose.
Yeah.
But progesterone does have side effects for sure. I don't know what kind of dose you're on. Is it
God.
like
I don't know.
pretty-
I think it's like 10, like maybe 10 milligrams or something.
Daily?
But no, like half the month. But
Okay.
it's like have you ever had a girlfriend with PMS?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a little terrifying for both of you.
No, I'm a very progressive person. I actually find it very enjoyable.
you embrace the
I embrace
PMS?
it, yeah. I know. Actually, I'm
He
very.
yes ands the PMS.
As you know, as a calculated person, I keep track of the calendar, so
you
I'm kind of there certain days and on the road certain days. So.
Make yourself unavails.
I mean, because if I'm not there, then it's not PMS.
That is clever.
Tearful texts and just accusation. I had become a little bit of a monster. Just so sad. I get so sad and so irritable. So yeah, I'll have to remember like, oh, it's gonna be a rough 10 days, and just try to counteract it. So yeah, you've got to replace it. But yeah, a lot of the like forums, everyone's like, I'm so sad to be diagnosed with this. I only have 3 kids, and I was hoping for a 4th. And then,
Oh, wow.
yeah, other people are like, at least I just diagnosed at 12. Like, at least you have kids. So it's like, it gets really emotional because people feel like I'm not a woman anymore. And so, yeah, it's also just fucking expensive because it's just like, oh, I gotta go in for more tests and stuff. I gotta get these patches. They're like $70 a month for that, and you're like, after insurance. So yeah, it's just one of those things that you just don't want to have to deal with. It's like having
When does this end? When you reach the 40s, or?
I think when I die, I think, I think that, how long are people typically on, I'm just going to ask you, how long do people typically replace their hormones?
When they have real menopause at like in their 40s and after,
Yeah.
it kind of just depends. Some women might stay on it for a few years. Some women could be on it for like up to 10 years. It sort of is like a pretty individual, but I'd say it kind of depends.
Yeah.
Some women, they can't tolerate the hormones. They try it and then it just doesn't work out.
Yeah.
And you'll know in a few weeks
Yeah.
if that's the case.
The patch has been good but the one thing is it's a bit unsightly. So it's like it's like a nicotine patch. So you have to put it somewhere on your body. And so
Yeah.
you're like, okay, what is no one gonna see? And so I was putting it like on my hip for a while, but then I would see it all day, every day, and I'd just be like, ugh, it'd be kind of a bummer. So then I started just putting it on my ass, and then I'm like, oh God, it's still there. And when you have a Band-Aid on and then you have glue around the Band-Aid, every time I change it, I have to like go in there with like a paint scraper and try to just get it off. So it's just,
Scrape the glue off.
yeah,
How often do you have to change it?
twice a week.
Oh.
But yeah, it's just one of those things where I'm like, ugh, it's like extra cleaning the gutters out, it's like an extra chore to do. But a lot of people just don't really want to talk about it. It happens to like 1% of people with ovaries. But a lot of people just don't talk about it because it's like embarrassing.
Anything premature is very embarrassing.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. Trust me. I know. I've heard from a lot of people.
Yeah, anecdotally.
Did they kind of tell you maybe why you developed this? Was there like a family history, or were you exposed to something, or?
That's a great question, and I think that's the first thing that people do is they have like a Nancy Kerrigan, Tanya Harding, like why, like just screaming into the sky, like why me, why this, and so yeah, that was like the first thing I did. I was like, what have I been eating? Like I lived in an apartment building with 5 cell towers on the roof, and I was like EMF radiation. I went down so many rabbit holes with like peer-reviewed studies and the thresholds for EMF radiation in Israel are completely different than in America. And is that just capitalism or is there really nothing to it? And I fly constantly for work and I started looking at like how much radiation do I, because radiation therapy
Yeah.
can kill your ovaries.
Exactly.
So then when it came to TSA pre-check, they'd have me go through the machines, and I know that it's such a low dose for me. Like, can I just get a pat down instead? Like, I already am having organ failure. So,
I always get a pat
Get the pat
down
down.
for
Yeah.
TSA.
It feels good.
I
It's
like
like
being
Reiki
touched
kind of-
by them. Yeah, no,
Yeah,
for
actually,
sure.
especially if you're
Because physical
lonely.
touch is my love language anyway. So
They hit every chakra too.
yeah, they do. Yeah, it's really I like it.
I had my wallet stolen and I only had an expired passport. So this week I got a couple extra pat downs. And one lady just very gently squeezed my feet. And I was like, that was really nice.
That's sweet.
I thanked
She didn't
her.
have to do that.
She didn't
Yeah.
have to. I love when they're like, I'm going to use the back of my hand for the buttocks. And I'm like, you can enjoy it. I don't mind. I'll enjoy it. You enjoy it. Like, don't skimp, treat yourself.
Are you a person who like tries to find meaning in things, or you just see the
Oh,
world
like,
as-
did I think
yeah,
that
like
this
what's
was...
what's the reason? What's the bigger picture for all this? Or you just like whatever it is, what it is?
No, I definitely was like, this is God's way of telling me one is enough of me. No, I didn't find much meaning in it. I didn't find much meaning in it. I kind of felt like, well, it was almost like someone taking away an option that I was like, well, okay, that makes it a little bit more definitive. But I had a boyfriend at the time, and we split up for a while after it. I think I think I was going through a ton of stuff emotionally, being like, I don't feel like he would really want to be with me because what if he decides he's younger than I am? What if he decides he wants kids? And I'm just like, I can't even put anything on ice here, buddy. So it's not like I got any in a locker somewhere where I'm like, let's bust these out. It's, it's time. And so I kind of freaked out and was like, I think you should go be with younger people and I think
You should go be with younger.
go
people.
be with some go be
Go to
with
the playground.
find someone you can take to prom.
So
18,
he
but
was
still in high
underage.
school.
She was dating a kid.
Yeah. and so there's
She's like, I'm a predator.
yeah, pretty much. I mean, I was like, let's wait till you're out of junior high. But I think, so we kind of went our separate ways, and I was like, maybe I'll go just find a nice divorced dad, or a widow.
Someone with a vasectomy, like someone who's
Yeah.
done, like
Someone who only mildly tolerates his kids, but the kids will like me, and that'll be fine. So, so we kind of went off and did our own thing for a while, and I remember at that time I had 7 friends get married that year, right after I got divorced, and right after I got diagnosed. Oh my God, only one of them's divorced now, but yeah, I had like 7 weddings to go to. I'd just been diagnosed, and my boyfriend and I had just broken up, and I remember I had this one friend who I'm no longer close with, but she was like, it was explaining how I didn't get to bring a +1 to her wedding because I didn't have a boyfriend, and she was like, like who would you even bring?
oh.
And I was like, oh, I'm like going through like a breakup and ovarian failure, and I've got to go to so many weddings where it's just all about like, I can't wait to have children with you and unity and love and like. You don't get to bring a +1 if you don't have a boyfriend to a lot of weddings because they're like, I don't want to pay $100
Yeah.
for you to bring a Tinder date to eat my rice pilaf. Like, come alone. Maybe you hook up with my brother-in-law, whatever.
Yeah.
And so it was just like this series of like weddings of me being like, I'm not having children. I'm alone. Like it was
Oh,
a really so
God.
that year the emotional part of it was the hardest, but it was a couple years ago, and I definitely have come to the other side of it. But it was that I didn't expect it to be as emotional as it was.
Of course it would be
Yeah.
emotional, though. I can't imagine going to 7 weddings while doing that.
Dude, it was.
I would just not go to the
I know.
weddings.
You are strong.
Oh,
Allie.
man,
You're a strong person.
There was some Chardonnay involved. For my coping was Chardonnay at that point. So I was
Yeah.
like, I'll just have 2 glasses at this one. But yeah, so
Now, for those of you who don't know, which is nobody because everybody knows, Allie is a science TV personality, what would you call yourself? I mean, you're an actress, science TV personality, host,
I would say
podcaster.
a science communicator. We'll say
Nice.
I
Science
try to
commu-
just take I try to take the layperson's view of science, and but the worst part about being a science enthusiast is like when I first got the diagnosis, I was like, I just got a PDF emailed to me, and they're like, the doctor will call you tomorrow, and I was like, oh, okay. And I was like, FSH is pretty high. I wonder what that means. And so I Googled it myself and was like, 135, is that bad? And so I found out I shouldn't have Googled it myself, but I was just so excited about lab results, and I was like, I'll just see what this means. So I diagnosed myself via PDF, like in a hotel room in New York, and I was like, and then I had to wait like a day to get the doctor's call, but I was like, dang it, I shouldn't be so enthusiastic about blood counts and things like that. This is because it's kind of fun to look at lab reports when you like science.
That must have, you were alone in a hotel room.
I was, yeah, not
When
my
you-
finest
Yeah.
day.
That must have been so hard.
It was tough. There was a lot of crying.
What
Yeah.
hotel was it?
I'm gonna guess it was a Hampton Inn, which is
Mid tier,
mid-tier. Got some reward points
two
for
point
it.
five star.
Just I soothed myself with the free coffee in the lobby.
Yeah, the continental breakfast
Yeah.
maybe.
Exactly.
Do you feel
but,
like all of this helped you focus on your career more? I mean, because you've been killing it in the last. I mean, I didn't know you before a year ago, but like you've been. I know you've been like killing it extra hard this last year, and I'm sure this is like you've probably had a focus or a drive that that comes with an experience like this. I would think. I mean,
Yeah, I think that's kind of the good part of it. You know, when you're really career oriented, it's as a woman, it is really hard to try to figure out, okay, if I have a baby, I travel for my job, I'm getting, luckily getting a ton of work and working on stuff, but I couldn't do this if I had a tiny baby. It would be really difficult to get on a plane.
big
all the time.
baby, yes.
A big baby, yes. A big fat turkey baby, I could just buy a seat for.
Yeah.
Fine. But so it definitely made the priority. The juggle of priorities became just a single holding of one priority. So, so it did. I think that it made me feel less guilty about pursuing my career because I
Right.
thought, well, I'm not putting off a baby that necessarily I can't have. And it made me really look at, okay, well, do I want to adopt? Would I foster? Would I do a donor egg? And those options weren't something that I was super stoked about, and I realized maybe I'm just not stoked about the baby.
Right.
Maybe that's just
Oh.
not. And also with climate change and overpopulation, I'm like other people.
Doing a favor to the planet.
Other people can have. I'll get a dog, but yeah, it relationship wise, I think that's the toughest thing because you really just feel like. I know that as a species, we're just wired to make more of us. So
But you're in a relationship that and everything's great.
yeah, we actually, this was my ex. We got back together after we both had some time apart, and
The
okay.
young one.
the young one, yeah. So
Okay, so you graduated.
he graduated. Yeah, he got his GED, and he has his driver's license now, which is so amazing. I'm there at every t-ball practice, rooting him on. No, but
Wow.
we had, had some time apart for like a year and a half, and he dated someone else, I dated someone else, and we just we came back together, and he was just like, I think that there's too many babies anyway, and don't worry about it, So, and that's been good. It feels like I feel accepted, and that I don't have to. But going into a new relationship, just to be like, by the way,
Yeah.
nothing here for you. But yeah, it did help me focus on my career, and I also was like, oh, well, I can spend a little bit more on a house because I don't have a college education to save up for.
Right.
So I was like, sweet, I will buy a new pair of pants. I don't have to buy anything for any babies.
You can buy a few pairs
I
of
can
pants
buy a few pairs of
now.
pants. So it's helped me kind of just throw myself into it. And I think one thing about having children is, we have this innate desire to have a legacy. We want to change the world. And up until, 100 years ago, a lot of us didn't have a way to change the world with our intellectual or property necessarily. Like most people couldn't publish a book. Most people couldn't make a TV show or put something of themselves in the world that will outlive them, other than a baby, other than their genetics. And we live in a time of media where you can self-publish a book. You can create artwork that lasts. You can make a podcast. You can do whatever. So you can create in ways that aren't limited to us as animals. So I really started to look at my career as if I'm going to have a legacy, it won't be genetic necessarily for me, but it will be in the people, the relationships I already have, and the work that I do. And I kind of came to terms with that, And my dad's one of 11, my mom's one of 6. There's enough of our genetics out there, you know?
That's a really beautiful and positive way to look at it. One of the things I realized is that we never actually closed the loop with my
Oh.
initial question of if you ever figured out if there was an
Oh.
underlying cause. So was this just one of those kind of random cases? Because I think 10% of primary ovarian failure can be just familial. Any idea if in your workup of what could have potentially caused it, was it the EMF?
All of the studies I've read point to no on that, although, I mean, my mom, when she delivered her first kid, her obstetrician was like smoking in the room, like during her pre-checkups, and then after she had the baby, this is in the early 70s, was like, if you want to take that weight off, whenever you're hungry, just go for a smoke. So like things have changed. What we accept as healthy has changed. So maybe we'll look back at radiation and go like, oh yeah. But
Yeah,
I
people
never
should have gotten more pat downs. Yeah.
exactly, or not lived in an apartment for 8 years with 5 cell phone towers 20 feet above their bed. But I never found out, and it was a hard thing to tell my parents. I went through it for about a year before I told them what was up.
Wow.
And they're like, "Why are you going to so many doctors? You okay?" And I was like, it's weird to say, "Well, I'm going. Your daughter's going through menopause." Is a weird question to have, but my sister went through it a little bit early, but not until her late 40s. And
Oh,
so,
really?
a little bit, but no one else in that side of the family, so nothing familial. And like my grandmother had a baby at 40, and my other grandmother had so like
Wow.
so I never found out. And they did autoimmune tests. They
Right.
thought maybe it was lupus. They thought maybe it was something autoimmune where I had antibodies, and it wasn't it. And so yeah, I went through autoimmune diets for a while to try to help. So
But you know science very well, so we could take your DNA and clone you if we wanted to,
1,000,000%, yeah.
So I know you have that like deeply in the back of your head, like
Oh.
worst case scenario.
If they can do it with 4 of Barbara Streisand's dogs, they could do it with one of me. And while they're in there, like, give me better eyesight, make my hair more manageable. Do you know what I mean? Maybe cut down on some of my anxiety. I want to be able to drink 1.5 gallons of coffee a day without crying. So maybe crisp me up some of that.
I would
know?
love to see the Alie Ward and Alie Ward show. It's just 2 Alie Wards.
It's just me cradling my baby
Baby
self
Alie
like
Ward.
the Madonna. It just doesn't get any more narcissistic.
Yeah.
It's like, I didn't even want to combine my DNA with anyone.
Yeah.
I just wanted something purely
Talk
me.
about a legacy.
Yeah, I know.